My phone buzzed on a Thursday morning in Istanbul as I sat in a luxurious hotel, preparing for a major meeting with a high-profile client. But when I saw Emily's name flash on the screen, I had no idea that what seemed like a routine call would completely change my life. "Can you hear me? I've sold our beach house. John and I are starting over. You can come back to get your things if you want, but I've already taken care of everything." Her voice was cold, without hesitation, as if this decision had been made long ago. There was no remorse, no hint of regret. The house we'd built, the place where we'd spent 15 years of our lives together, where we dreamed of growing old, was now gone, sold in an instant. But what hurt more than the sale was the way she told me, as if I no longer meant anything to her. I kept calm, refusing to let my emotions take over. I simply asked one question. "When did you sell it?" She answered casually, without a hint of surprise or guilt. "3 days ago. It's all done." When the call ended, I didn't rush to do anything. Sitting in that hotel in Istanbul, I gazed out the window at the rain-soaked city, my mind in turmoil, but a strange coldness settled in my chest. She thought I would just accept this betrayal, that I would continue my business trip as though nothing had happened. But I knew I couldn't stay silent. I had spent years working meticulously and carefully, and now was the time to apply those skills to protect myself. I had a plan. Not a plan for revenge, but a plan to protect what I had built. My home, the assets I had worked for over the years. And most importantly, I wasn't going to let Emily and John, her lover, easily take everything I had worked for. I wouldn't let myself become the victim in my own story. So I decided to return to the US immediately. I didn't tell Emily about my sudden return. I was going back to show them that what they'd done wouldn't be as easy as they thought. I'm Martin Royce, 54 years old, a well-known commercial real estate expert in San Francisco. My job is simple yet incredibly complex. I search for hidden opportunities in properties that others overlook, negotiate deals that no one else would think possible, and turn them into profitable ventures. Simply put, I'm the one who sees the value others can't. With over 30 years in the industry, I've witnessed all kinds of deals, legal battles, and high-stakes negotiations. My success doesn't come from taking risks or relying on luck. It comes from patience, precision, and the ability to spot the small details most people miss. I've learned how to leverage every number, every word in a contract to gain the upper hand. From a young age, I understood that every small decision, every period or comma in a document could change your life. But success in my career didn't protect my marriage, and that was something I never saw coming. I spent most of my time flying around the country, attending meetings, negotiating, and closing big deals. I got lost in my work, letting long nights at the office replace time with my family. I ignored many signs in my relationship with Emily. Emily and I had been married for 19 years. I met her at a real estate conference in New York, back when she was a property manager for a big company. From the moment we met, I was impressed by her confidence and sharp intellect. We quickly became business partners, and before long, we decided to marry. Our relationship was smooth at first. We had a house in San Francisco and a beach house in Malibu that we built and decorated together. But things started to change about 2 years ago. Small but unmistakable signs began to show up. Emily seemed less interested in me than before. She talked less, shared fewer moments of her life, replacing our conversations with short messages. She seemed to care more about her own work. Our dinners together became rare, and slowly, I found myself being left behind. At first, I thought it was just the stress of work, but I was wrong. It became clearer when I noticed she was working out more, attending fitness classes I wasn't invited to. Then came the strange expenses, the dinners out with friends I didn't know about, the weekend getaways she went on without me. I didn't ask, didn't interrogate. I just quietly observed and kept it in the back of my mind. I had a feeling that one day the truth would come crashing down. And then it happened. On that Thursday morning, while I was in Istanbul overseeing a major transaction, I got a call from Emily. I was sitting in a luxury hotel, preparing for an important meeting with a client. I never expected this call would completely change my life. When I saw her name on the screen, I thought maybe she was calling to remind me of something about the house or family. But when I heard her voice, I realized it was nothing like I had imagined. She began with a cold statement. "Can you hear me? I've sold our beach house. John and I are starting over. You can come get your things if you want." The name John hit me like a cold bucket of water. John, her personal trainer, someone I had always thought of as part of our family. I didn't say anything, just asked one question, my voice calm even though a storm of rage was building inside me. "When did you sell it?" I asked. 3 days ago, she replied, without a hint of regret. "It's all done and we're not going back. You can come get your things if you want." I stood there, silent. Even though I had prepared myself for this, nothing could prepare me for the shock. I had believed our marriage was forever, that Emily and I would face everything together. But in a moment, it all came crashing down. I looked out the hotel window at the cars rushing through the rain-soaked streets of Istanbul, pedestrians hurrying into cafes. I felt like an outsider, abandoned in a world of chaos. But then, something strange washed over me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I just felt a strange clarity. Emily had made a mistake thinking I would silently accept this betrayal. She didn't know that I had been preparing for this moment for a long time. And now, I would use the same meticulous attention to detail that had served me in my career to protect what I had built. That beach house we'd built together. It wasn't hers to sell. And I wasn't going to let anyone, whether it was my wife or anyone else, take away what I had spent my life creating. When I returned to San Francisco, I didn't rush back to my beach house. What I felt now wasn't anger or hatred, but a sense of resolve and clarity. I was no longer the man in shock, no longer the one who had been betrayed. I was someone taking action to protect what I had built. As I drove to the beach house, I didn't tell Emily I had returned early. I decided not to inform her of what I was going to do. After all, everything had already gone too far. The coldness in her voice when she told me she had sold the house, the indifference when I asked about the details of the transaction, everything made me realize that I needed a clear plan. And my plan was simple: protect the house she had no right to sell. When I arrived at the gate, a new Mercedes parked in the driveway told me all I needed to know. John, her personal trainer, the man I'd always thought played a minor role in Emily's life, was here. Just thinking about it felt like a slap to my face. I pulled into the garage, not rushing. This would all end today. I entered the house without knocking. This was still my home. I had always felt it was mine, not just because of the property, but because it was where I had poured everything, where I had built a family. The front door was open, and the sound of laughter from the kitchen made my stomach turn. Emily and John were talking, planning things I had never been a part of. Emily stood at the kitchen counter, pouring wine into glasses, while John stood next to her, his hand casually resting on her shoulder as if he'd always been there. That sight hit me like a punch to the gut. Her words echoed in my mind. We need a fresh start, and I don't need you anymore. That was the line that had killed whatever was left of our marriage. Now, I was going to show her that I would never accept her stealing my life without consequences. I walked into the living room without saying a word. When both of them turned to look at me, Emily's face showed clear surprise, but she quickly masked it, a look of discomfort taking over. "You're back early?" she asked, but her voice lacked the concern it once held. "We need to talk," I said, my gaze fixed on her, unwavering. "Both of you. This can't just end like this." John, clearly surprised, stood up and pushed his chair back. "I should probably go," he said, his laughter awkward. I looked at him but said nothing. "No need to rush, stay. I want to talk to both of you." Emily turned to me, clearly irritated. "We don't have to make this difficult, Martin. I've told you John and I need a fresh start. You no longer have a say in my life." I looked at her, then lowered my gaze to the table. The documents I had prepared in my briefcase were now out and laid on the table. "Is that so? You think you have the right to sell this house without consulting me? This is my property, not yours." I placed my hand on the documents. "You had no right to do this. I transferred ownership of this house to a trust that I'm the sole manager of a year ago. You don't have the authority to sell it, and this transaction is void." At that moment, John looked at me, confused. "What are you talking about? She told me everything was finalized, that you'd signed all the papers." I took a copy of the contract and handed it to Emily, so she could see for herself. "You signed these papers without reading them carefully. You thought I would never respond?" I emphasized each word. "The ownership of this house is not yours. The deal you're calling done is nothing more than a scam you tried to pull off." Emily looked at the papers, her face starting to change. She quickly flipped through the pages, the tension clear in every move. "This can't be. This can't be," she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. "This is the truth," I said, "and you know this transaction holds no value. Everything you've done is being investigated. Both you and John will have to face the consequences." John looked between us, clearly worried. "This isn't going to be easy," he muttered, then quickly left without saying another word. Now, in the house I had spent my life building, only Emily and I remained. She looked at me, her eyes full of anger, but no longer with the same confidence. "You can't do this, Martin. I didn't want this." "You already did," I replied, "and now you have to face the consequences of your actions." Emily continued to try to convince me, speaking in soft tones, but I felt nothing but coldness. I had prepared for this moment, and now it was time for her to realize that I wasn't someone easily beaten. What I felt at this moment wasn't victory. It wasn't the joy of protecting the home I cherished. It was disappointment. I realized that it was too late. We couldn't go back to how things were. No matter how much I wanted to salvage this relationship, no matter how hard I tried, her betrayal had shattered everything. Emily exhaled sharply, her face showing clear frustration. "Do you know, I thought long and hard before making this decision. But what about you? Did you ever really pay attention to me?" she said, her voice full of accusation. I didn't answer right away. Her words felt like a knife to my heart. For so many years, I had poured all my energy into my work, neglecting the emotions and the things that truly mattered to me. But I couldn't stand the sight of her not only betraying me but also treating me as though I meant nothing in her life. "I didn't ignore you," I answered. my eyes locking onto hers. "But you chose this path. You can call it freedom, but to me it's betrayal. You sold our house without considering me, without any respect for the years we've spent together." She turned away, her lips pressed tightly together, but I knew my words had struck a deep wound inside her. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice lighter but still filled with arrogance. "You don't understand. You can't understand what I've been feeling. My whole life has been for the family, for you, but you never paid attention to me, to my needs, my desires. You only cared about your work and your contracts." I couldn't help but feel bitterness at her accusation. She was right. I had been too absorbed in my work, too focused on outside success, ignoring the wife who had been by my side for so many years. But that wasn't an excuse for her to deceive me. It wasn't a reason for her to sell our property without informing me. "You can say everything you feel to me," I replied, the tension rising in my chest. "But selling this house wasn't the way to solve your problems. You had no right to do that. You didn't just betray me. You destroyed everything we built." "How about the price I had to pay, Martin?" Emily interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what I sacrificed, leaving everything behind to have this family. Do you know how it feels when everything seems to revolve around your work?" Her voice grew weaker, her eyes searching mine as though hoping for some sympathy, some sign that I would understand her. But I couldn't, because right now, her betrayal wasn't just about selling the house. It was about her cornering me, forcing me to choose between saving a marriage that had no chance or facing the truth, no matter how painful, to protect what I had spent my life building. And then, a thought flashed through my mind, cutting off all my emotions instantly. If she thought I would easily accept this, she was wrong. I couldn't let it go like this. I couldn't let her continue pulling the strings of my life without facing the consequences. I had already prepared my next move, and now it was time to act. "We're not going to get anywhere if we keep going like this, Emily," I said, my voice deepening, full of determination. "You were wrong, and now it's time for you to pay for what you've done. The deal you made has no value. It's not going to stand." She looked at me, her eyes full of anger and confusion. "You can't do this, Martin," she yelled, as if trying to pull me into her battle. "You won't dare take me to court." "You'll see," I replied, then turned to walk out the door. "You can go on with your life, but I won't let you take what I've built so easily." Stepping out of the house we once dreamed of, I felt a strange sense of relief. Everything was clear now. It was time to protect what I deserved, and I wouldn't let Emily or anyone else change that. After the tense conversation with Emily, I couldn't bring myself to return to the beach house. I couldn't continue living the way I had before. Our relationship had officially reached a point of no return, and even though I had prepared myself for it, I couldn't avoid the feeling of emptiness. Everything had changed. But one thing was clear. No matter what happened, I would not allow myself to become a victim in this game. In the days that followed, I ignored Emily's calls, her messages, and even the ones from her lawyer. I didn't answer, didn't react. I knew that if I let myself get dragged into her game, I would lose all control. The only thing I could do now was act, and I had already prepared my next move. Not for revenge, but to protect myself and everything I had worked for. One morning, I met Brian Eldridge, my lawyer, in his office. Brian was an old friend, someone who had helped me with legal matters before. He was the one I trusted now, as everything seemed to be falling apart. He had thoroughly reviewed the documents and information I provided, and what I was about to hear from him was a bigger shock than I had imagined. "Martin, I've done everything I can to dig deeper into this," Brian began, his voice serious. "There's more to this than we need to talk about." I looked at him, anxiety mixed with curiosity. "What? Is there something new?" He slid a thick file toward me. This could be the turning point. After reviewing everything, I discovered some things even you didn't know. I opened the file and began flipping through the papers. First were bank account statements, large transfers from our joint account into an account of hers. There were secret transactions, unexplained expenses. Each line, each word felt like a blow to the trust I had placed in her. "These are amounts you didn't know about, Martin," Brian continued. "Emily withdrew a large sum from our joint account without telling you, nearly $200,000, and there's more." I found a strange document. Brian pulled out another sheet of paper. It was a lease agreement for a storefront I had never heard of. She and John started a business project in Savannah, opening a gym, and of course they used your money. I felt everything spinning. I couldn't believe what was happening right in front of me. Over the years, I had thought I knew everything, that I understood Emily better than anyone else. But now I realized I was just a fool, trapped in a scheme I had no idea about. What I had thought was a peaceful family life had suddenly turned into a sinister game that I never saw coming. "There's more," Brian said, flipping through a few more pages. "There's something you won't expect. The buyer of our beach house wasn't a regular client, but a shell company. And the owner of that company is John." The name John appeared once again. The one Emily had secretly been seeing, her lover. That name had become synonymous with betrayal, with everything I had endured. But I never expected him to be behind the sale of the house I had cherished, as part of a grand scheme they had set up long ago. "So they've been planning to take over this house for a long time," I said, my voice darkening with fury. "They used my trust to pull off the perfect scam, but they forgot one thing." Brian looked at me, waiting for me to continue. "They forgot that I'm not someone who's easily defeated." I stood up, feeling a wave of strength rising within me. "And I'm not going to let myself be fooled like this." I felt like a heavy stone had been lifted from my chest, but at the same time, it was a release. The truth was out, and now I knew what I had to do next. Emily and John would both have to face the consequences of their actions. I had enough evidence, enough grounds to fight for what I had lost, and I wouldn't stop until justice was served. "We're not just going to protect the property," I said to Brian, my eyes determined. "We're going to take this higher, and I won't let her get away with what she's done." This was no longer just a story of a divorce. To me, this wasn't just about protecting property or rights. This was a no-holds-barred fight to reclaim respect, to restore justice, and to stop the life of deception Emily had created from continuing. After all the truths came to light, I couldn't remain calm any longer. Thoughts and emotions swirled within me like crashing waves that couldn't be extinguished. I knew I had to act fast. From that day on, I had Brian file a lawsuit against Emily and John for fraud and property theft. I couldn't let them easily walk away from what they had done. But I didn't expect that the deeper I went into this fight, the more complex and intense everything would become. The next morning, while I was working in my office, I received a call from Brian. His voice was more tense than usual. "Martin, there's something I need to tell you. Emily has hired a new lawyer, and they're preparing to respond to our allegations. She not only wants a divorce, but she also wants a significant portion of the assets." That statement hit me like a slap in the face. I had prepared myself for this battle, but I didn't expect her to go this far. It wasn't just about selling the house without telling me, or her secret meetings with John. She was now aiming to take everything I had worked for, using everything I had to secure her own benefit. So what are they planning to do? I asked, trying to keep calm. In my mind, a series of worst scenarios began to unfold. With each passing minute, I felt myself being pushed into a corner. The suffocating feeling of the next attacks from Emily loomed over me. She's requested a division of assets, and they're going to present some evidence from her side, even stories about how I've neglected her over the years. If she wins, we could lose the beach house, and possibly a large portion of our assets, Brian said, his voice filled with concern. She's not just seeking a divorce. She's aiming to financially harm you. A wave of anger and loss surged within me, not because of the money, but because of the injustice. Everything I had built, everything that mattered to me, was about to be taken so easily, as if all my sacrifices over the years meant nothing. "All right, Brian," I said, each word strengthening my resolve. "She can try, but I won't let her win. This isn't just going to end with words." As soon as I hung up the phone, I turned to my desk. A sense of tension filled every fiber of my being. I had to prepare for Emily's next move, but I also knew she wouldn't back down easily. I realized this battle wasn't just about the house. It was a psychological war, a fight to reclaim my dignity and everything I had fought for over the years. That night, I didn't go home right away. I sat in my office, continuing to go through the documents, the evidence I had. In my mind, a new plan began to form. I couldn't let this slide. I wouldn't let Emily continue to pull the strings of my life. A week later, I received a message from Emily. She said she wanted to meet to discuss a settlement. I didn't rush to respond, but I knew this was the perfect opportunity to meet face to face and clear things up. I no longer wanted to negotiate with her over a call or text. I wanted everything to be clear, to get to the bottom of things. When I walked into the cafe where we had arranged to meet, I realized Emily had come prepared for a tactical conversation. She sat there, dressed in a smart outfit, her face cold and emotionless, showing no sign of regret or remorse. She looked at me, her gaze still determined. "We need to talk, Martin," she began, her voice even but carrying an underlying toughness. "I've done what I needed to do. You can't keep going on like this. We need to resolve this quickly." I sat down across from her, not in a rush to speak. "Resolve? Do you think we can just resolve this easily, Emily?" I looked her straight in the eye, unwavering. "You've deceived me. You've deceived yourself. And now you want to resolve this? How?" She paused, a hint of confusion crossing her face, but she quickly regained her icy composure. "I want this over and done with. No more dragging it out. What do you want?" "It's not what I want, Emily," I responded, my voice firmer than ever. "It's that you will have to take responsibility for what you've done. I have all the evidence, and I won't accept any settlement that isn't fair. You can't take away what I've spent my life building." Emily was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at me, her eyes calculating. She knew I had prepared thoroughly for this confrontation. She could no longer deceive me so easily. That day, after the tense meeting at the cafe, I knew everything was coming to an end. Emily and I had nothing left to say to each other, nothing left to compromise on. All I could do now was move forward and make sure she would pay for what she had done. And I no longer hesitated about it. Justice had to be served. In the following weeks, I worked tirelessly with Brian, my lawyer, to prepare for the next steps. Everything was ready. All the evidence, the documents, the money Emily had withdrawn from our joint account, the fraudulent contracts she and John had signed, all were set. I no longer worried about what she might do next. My resolve was clear, and it couldn't be shaken. The day came when I stood before the courthouse, waiting for the trial to begin. Inside, there was a strange feeling. It wasn't one of triumph or joy, but an unusual calm, as if everything had been preordained. I no longer thought about revenge or about ruining anyone. All I wanted was fairness and restitution for what I had lost. I stood firm, not looking back, with no regrets about what had happened. Emily sat across from me, no longer the confident, cold figure she had once been. She knew that everything she had done was now laid bare in the light. She looked at me, her eyes no longer victorious, but tired, almost defeated. Sometimes I saw her gaze drift away, as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she remained silent. "Martin," Emily began, her voice lowered. "I know I've been wrong. I've been wrong in so many ways, but I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I've lost everything." Her voice came out weak, but I didn't feel any sympathy anymore. "All that you've done, Emily, can't be undone," I said, but my tone wasn't bitter. It was calm, something I couldn't hide. "This is the result of the betrayal you chose. You haven't just hurt me, you've hurt yourself too." I paused. "Now it's time for you to take responsibility." The trial continued, and everything went as I had expected. She couldn't defend her actions. The evidence that Brian and I had gathered was irrefutable. Emily was ordered to return most of the money she had taken, and the ownership of the beach house remained with me. I didn't feel victorious in the courtroom, but I felt a strange sense of release. It was the feeling of no longer being bound by lies, of no longer being trapped in the past. When the court delivered the final decision, I stood up and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. I didn't need to say anything else. It was all clear now. Emily would face the consequences of what she had done, and I would continue with my life. After the trial, I returned to the beach house, the place where Emily and I had built so many memories together. But now, it was no longer a place filled with sorrow and disappointment. I had decided to change everything, not because I wanted to forget the past, but because I wanted to build a new future. A future without the burden of betrayal, a future that I could control on my own. I began renovating the house, replacing the old items we had chosen together with new, more modern ones. Every detail of the house now reflected a fresh start, a new beginning. I was no longer the man trapped by someone else's decisions. I had taken control of my own life. A few months later, I received news from Brian. Emily had opened a fitness studio in Savannah with John, but the business wasn't going as smoothly as she had hoped. While that might have been a small consolation, I didn't feel any joy. I no longer cared about their struggles, no longer felt satisfaction in witnessing their failures. I had left everything behind, and I was focusing on rebuilding my life. 3 months had passed since the trial, and my life had begun to settle into a peaceful rhythm, one that no longer carried the tension or anxiety it once had. The beach house that Emily had tried to sell was still mine, but it was no longer just an asset, a house I had painstakingly built. It was a symbol of recovery, of me not only protecting what I had worked for, but also reclaiming control of my life. Every morning, I woke up early, sipped on a hot cup of coffee, and gazed at the ocean view before me. The waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, just like the rhythm of my life now, steady, stable, and free of any turmoil. This house was no longer a place that held painful memories or betrayal. It had been transformed, rebuilt with new, brighter, and more modern details. Every corner of the house reflected a new beginning I was seeking. One of the things I was most proud of after everything was that I had protected this house, not just as a property, but as a source of pride and effort that I had invested in over the years. I didn't let anyone take away what I had spent my life building. This house was not just a place to live, it was where I found myself again, where I regained peace and freedom in my soul. One late afternoon, I sat in the living room, looking out at the ocean. Everything was calm, but I could feel that it was the peace I had been waiting for. My life was no longer a series of battles for property, nor was it a race to prove myself to anyone. I had regained my freedom, and that was the most important thing. When I looked back at what had happened, I no longer felt anger, nor did I feel regret. Everything had passed, and I had learned how not to be ruled by the past. I had lost things that mattered, but I had also discovered an inner strength I had never realized before. Emily's betrayal didn't break me. Instead, it showed me my own strength, my ability to rise up and keep moving forward. My new life was not one filled with regrets or longing for what had passed. I had taken control of my life, and I could now look to the future with confidence and hope. And no matter how things unfolded, I knew I would never let myself be dragged into someone else's games again. I returned to my life, continuing with the work I loved, focusing on the things that made me happy. I started new projects, met new people, and built a future I could be proud of. The memories of Emily, the old house, and all those struggles no longer caused me pain. I had risen above them, stronger and freer than ever before,